It's getting mightily close to draft day. Have you got your league order set yet? Do you know what pick you've got and who might land to you in that first round selection? Well, here at the Coaches Panel, we have fully published for our breakout and premium tier Patreons our full draft tiers list for 2025 on the Keeper platform. That is where we will be drafting in 2025. Not only do they do Dynasty and Keeper leagues, but it's the place you can do your single season drafts. And so throughout this episode, I wanted to share with you who I've got in my top tier of defenders, my top tier of mids, rucks, and also forwards. Who are those players? I'll tell you about them in the moment. But if you want to get access to the full list, simply just follow the links in the description of this episode and become a breakout or a premium tier supporter, and you can gain access. Or if you head straight to the Patreon page, you're like, MJ, don't want to get involved in any of this monthly supporter base. I just want the tiers. I want them now, and that's all I want from you. Well, you can buy the collection and get the full listing just there and then at that price point. So you can jump in there and do that. It is one of the great ways to not only help give you some accessibility to some of the thoughts about what I think about how you could approach drafts this year, it also does support the Coaches Panel. So we would greatly appreciate you getting involved in that. If you've never drafted through tiers, it's greatly important for a number of different reasons. But one of them, when it just comes to a pure rankings of I've got this player first and this player second and this player third, sometimes what can happen on draft day is runs can happen. Players can start to fly off, and all of a sudden you feel this urgent pull to be like, oh, if I don't get a ruck now, I'm not going to. And so you end up getting the 7th or 8th best ruckman available, but all of the best defenders, or a majority of them, might be sitting there. So by placing players into tiers, not just in numerical order of rank, it actually gives you a greater understanding of who are the best players in the best positions and where, as I forecast what's about to come to me on draft day and what might make it back to me. It just gives you a little bit more information about how you can choose to draft. We will drop a video soon that explains even greater depth about how you should approach your draft day, and there's a bunch of different elements. But this episode is all about the tiers, who I've got, why I've got them there, and I'll even share with you my projected average of what I think they're going to do for you as well. I've just got 4 defenders in my top tier. Let me tell you who they are. Harry Sheezel. I don't think this shocks anybody, does it? But based on my projected average range, I think his range of outcomes is actually quite narrow. I don't think we're going to see him plummet away too drastically. I've got him sitting in the range of one of the only really 2 defenders that I'm confident should go 110. There's one more I think has that within their capacity. Harry Sheezel, I've got him going at a range from 105 to 112. That's my projected range for 2025. Even with this now predominant move to the midfield and an opportunity to play through the forward line. We unpacked a lot about him through the 50 most relevant. You can go and check out that episode. It is on this platform. You can go and check it out. I still think he's the best defensive option available to us. And if I was spending an early selection on any defender, he's absolutely right in consideration. The player that I also think is capable of matching it with Harry in 2025 and would probably, while he's a tier 1, won't go as commonly early as Harry does, who based on ADP, your average draft position, he's probably a top 2 selection on draft day, is a Lachie Whitfield. So I think he can get a pretty comparable output. Now, there's a greater injury risk that sits in that space based on career of legacy. But again, I've got him going a 105 to 112 this year. A lot of depth has been kind of chipped away through the Giants with the loss of Perryman and Cumming. While they're more mid and wing impacting, there's nobody that's going to come and take this share of ball. They love, under the Adam Kingsley system, to move the ball through Lachie Whitfield. Injury's the only thing that's going to prevent him from really delivering on that projected average, and the game's play sitting in there. So to me, I think he's one of the best defenders going round for us. Jack Sinclair, I've got his as a projected average of a 101. I think he can creep up to a 110. he's really been a 102, 103 sort of range guy for the last couple of years. But to me, I'm still really confident in Jack Sinclair. The reason I am so confident, even with the hamstring injury in the preseason, is one, it's a uncommon injury for Jack of late. So that's for one. And number two, it does appear that it's early days. The ball movement under Ross Lyon seems to be funneled even more through Jack this year. No Riley Bonner does open up a little bit more ball movement opportunity, some kick-in opportunity. Sounds like they like Nazaya Wanganeen Miller a little bit higher up the ground through the wings and even being trialled through the forward line, whereas Jack seems to be anchored now across his halfback. So he's one of only 3 defenders I think have the capacity to get up to a 110 in the back line. So I think he's worth a shout. And again, compared to a Whitfield or a Sheasel, he's going later based on ADP. So I think he is the kind of the right guy that I like. I often like where I can, depending on what my draft position is. I like seeing if I can get the bottom of the tier that is right at the top line, because that's where I feel like I get the best value of return. And so a player like Sinclair, who I've got 3rd on my list of tier 1 defenders, this is the right sort of spot because Sheasel's top 5 pick universally. Whitfield's predominantly going inside the next sort of 10 picks of sort of 10 to 20 range. And Sinclair's got that capacity, but I think some people are cool on him because of hamstring. So getting a Sinclair based on ADP considerably later screams value for me. In a coach's panel mock draft that we did not too long ago, I got him in the 3rd round. It was an absolute steal based on what he has been. So to me, I think Sinclair's a tier 1 defender, as is Dane Zorko. I've got 4 defenders that I'm confident their basement is 100 average. I've got him projected to have his ceiling as 107. Of course, he can go 110 plus, but I think as the season goes on and Kitty Coleman does come in to the side, which will not happen early, I just think that might clip some of those really bigger ceiling games that sit through that space. So I'm a little bit more wary of what that could be. So those are my tier 1 defenders. Sheasel, Whitfield, Sinclair, Zorko. Are they your tier 1 defenders? I would love to know. Let me know. Get in touch. Let me know who your tier 1 defenders are. In the midfield, I've just got 5. It was 6. But with the injury to Tom Green, I've had to drop him out of my tier 1 because I just can't say drafting Tom Green in the 1st round, which really a tier 1 mid is a consideration for it. I just couldn't advocate for that. He'll drift into the 3rd round and still be a great pick, and maybe even longer depending on how concerned coaches are. But these are the 5 mids I've got. All of them have a basement. I think I can't see any of these going under 105. But Andrew Brayshaw, I've got as the highest projected midfielder this year. I think his projected average range could actually be really quite vast. With a floor of 105, I don't see him going under that. I've got him projected to potentially his ceiling being 120. He's the only player on this entire tier list that I think has the capacity to go 120 this year. That's how bullish I am on Andrew Brayshaw. And again, his ADP, he's delivering value on that. Look, he just does everything so well, doesn't he? He tackles, he marks, he gets involved on the inside and the outside, scoring at stoppage and transition. And is a real bulk scorer with how he accumulates his keeper points. And so he's the kind of player I just love to have. And with the emergence of Caleb Sarong, you're just now no longer tagging Andrew Brayshaw because Sarong is way more damaging per possession than what Andrew Brayshaw seems to be. So to me, I've got him. All of these guys are very equal and even based on their basement, which is 105, but I think Brayshaw's got the highest ceiling potential. Also sitting in my tier 1 mids is a Jordan Dawson. I think his projected range of outcomes could be anywhere from a 105 right up to a 118. That feels really big and bold, I know. Positional volatility was what hurt and impacted Jordan last year. I feel like the Crows have resolved those issues. Jump back through the 50 most relevant series that's on this platform, where I unpack a little bit more in depth about how the Crows have fixed their positional volatility, of why Dawson had to be the utility that fixed all their issues where they were deficient in their list through injuries and just lack of depth. Those have been now addressed, and I'm very, very comfortable with what I think Jordan Dawson is going to be. He's already got a career average 110 plus and high in the tens. Before that, I think he's going to get in and around that range. I do not think he's got 120 in him. I'd love it. As a Crows supporter, I would love it, but I just don't think that's within his range. Another tier 1 mid I have is Nick Dacos. All signs and now conversation you can get from both publicly from Collingwood, but also privately, is they feel like he is well and truly on top of any of that plantar fasciitis issues that was previously bothering him early in the preseason. I've got him with a range of outcomes based on average from the 105 all the way up to 117. I just don't think he can quite hit the heights of a Jordan Dawson. The reason being, I think there's going to be 1 or 2 games more because of how he plays the game. He's much more prone to be getting teams trying to sit on him, and doesn't add in a couple of other areas when it comes to contested marks, tackles. They're not his games. But on the games that Dawson's more likely to get sat on, I just feel like he's got some other avenues of scoring on the keeper platform that just might see him not be as bottomed out. It's 1 point per game. Like, I'm being very finicky here, but I think he's still a tier 1 midfielder and could slide a little bit, depending on when your draft is. Like, I mean, late first round, not mid first round, is that level of slide. But to me, he's still a tier 1 midfielder. The last 2 midfielders got in the tier. Again, I originally had 6. I've skimmed it down to 5 with Tom Green's injury. Errol Goulden. I think his range of outcome, the projected average, is anywhere ranging from 105 right through to 115. Over big chunks of 2024, he was a 110 plus midfielder. He's been just so consistent, so durable, so reliable, and one of the few outside midfielders that just gets involved at such a high volume, scores well on transition and on those stoppage opportunities. I just don't see a reason of regression coming for and through him. If there are any changes through the midfield, which it seems like Callum Mills is one of those, I only think that aids someone like an Errol Goulden. So I don't see a cliff coming. He's a star of the competition and he sits right at that spot. And then the last of the 5 tier 1 midfielders I have is probably, from a legacy perspective, he just feels like the most bulletproof. And when I talk about picking guys from the bottom of a tier and getting them at their best value point and still getting a top tier option or an upper tier option, a player like Zach Merritt, who I've got basically as a 105 to a 110 guy. I don't see him pushing back to the 115 sort of territories with the likes of how they're moving the ball and the options that are rolling through this midfield. But I just don't forecast a drastic fall away. He'll give you 2 or 3 games where he gets tagged, gets you 60, 70, 80, but that will be offset by other games of 3, 4, 5 games in the year where he goes 150, 155, 160. That's just what Nick Dacos is. He gets involved in all components. Those tag basement games aren't as chaotic as they used to be 3, 4, 5 years ago. So to me, he feels like the most bulletproof of all of these guys. Now, I think all of them have 105 as their floor, but of the range of outcomes, who's the least likely to go under 105? History would tell you it's Zach, and I wouldn't argue against it for you. Who are my tier 1 rucks? I just have the 3. Some have 4 and would squeeze in a Tim English. I just don't think I've got him at that same level right now. He's been that 12 months ago. I'm not sure he's going to be at that, but you should be no surprise here. All of them, again, I have them as their floor of 105. But Tristan Cherry leads the tier off, a 105 to a 117 range. He was the player I dubbed the most relevant for salary cap or classic coaches in the 50 most relevant series, which is, again, available on this channel. But to me, I think he's probably going to start the season slow and come home like a steam train. Why? Check out that episode of the 50 Most Relevant. There's some fixture analysis, some opposition analysis. Just gives me that gut instinct. Look, based on ADP, he's the most common player selected at number 1, and I really understand why. Because what are you more likely to get to you on the turn if you were doing a snake draft at 2nd or 3rd round pick? Yeah, you're still likely to get 100, 102, 103, 104, 5 sort of mid if you wanted a mid through that spot, you could still get probably a 90s forward or definitely a 100 quote-unquote defender. But rucks, really, after these top three, these are the only guys I feel very confident in ranking are going to be 100-plus guys. English capacity and potential, maybe. Nank capacity and potential, maybe. Grundy capacity and potential, maybe. Briggs capacity and potential, maybe. But to me, look, Tristan Cherry feels like the most safe, got the best narrative and pathway, and of all my Tier 1 rucks, has had the least issues of injuries. So to me, he leads that tier off. Rowan Marshall does seem to be knocking on the door of even being able to play in the preseason games, let alone being right for opening matchup in round one. So again, I think he's a 105 to 115 guy. I have got zero concerns about what they've done in the off-season with the arrivals of Dodson and of Boyd. I think Boyd is just simply the halfway house to protect Dodson as they develop this young ruckman. And if they need to, Boyd is there to really be the relief option should injuries occur to a Rowan Marshall. I don't see him being anything more than that. Yes, there's concerns about Max King, but I don't think Boyd is going to be the way that they put Marshall forward and do that. I just don't see that. 105 is the floor. I think 115 is a little bit of regression of scoring. And the other reason I've got a fraction of potential regression of his ceiling is they've just got some more options through the midfield than what they've had over the past few years. I just think that might clip a fraction of that extra kick or handball here or there when he gets involved around the ground, but he's still going to go big. And then the last ruck I have in tier 1 is Max Gawn. Very, very similar to Rowan Marshall, but I think you're going to get him a little bit later on draft day, which could be important. I've still got him in that range of 105 to 115. So vital, so critical to this side. And while they're in this transitional phase of their list build in a bunch of different areas with Lindsay, Langford, McVie, Windsor, these are high caliber young stars. Pickett is another that's still well and truly on the younger side of his career development. Van Rooyen, another. They've still got some very much ready-made premiership stars, and that midfield is littered with them, with Oliver, Viney and Petrarca, let alone Gawn to lead it off. So they're still in win-now mode while also trying to regenerate for the future and not fall away too chaotically for a long window of time. Yes, they've underperformed since winning the grand final. I wouldn't disagree with that. But Max Gawn last year, I think he's going like 125, 130 for big chunks of the year. I'm not too sure that over the season he could replicate that for a year. But there's nobody else on this list that can ruck. Van Rooyen is a reliever and nothing else. Tom Campbell, has just become the insurance policy and nothing else. So to me, I do like Max Gawn. I think you get him at a value point, at least in comparison to what it would cost you to get a Marshall, it cost you to get a Cherry. And I think English, even in some drafts I've seen, at least based on ADP, is getting picked ahead of Gawn, which to me I can't get around. I understand it in a keeper or a dynasty league, but not so much in a single season league, which is exactly what these tier rankings are based for. And then we'll wrap it up with the forwards for you. I have 5 tier 1 forwards, which is wild considering the ceiling of one option and the floor of another is as many as 20 points per game. It's more just the fact that if you don't get one of these top 5 forwards, and these are all, there's a total of 17 players across tier 1 of all my lines. If you don't pick up one of these guys before the end of I don't know. I think most of them will be gone by the 3rd round. If you don't get one of them, you're going to be weak and probably needing to double up and get 2 F2 equivalents or tier 2 forwards just to protect it. Because if you haven't done a mock draft yet on keeper, and we've done one of those for the coaches panel, you haven't played around and looked through what people have done in the community, the forwards at 3, 4, and 5 get icky anyway, let alone if you don't have a top line option. So to me, really critical you do land one of these guys, which is even more noticeable and needed should you have a 3-4-1-3 type of league or a 12-team league. All those variables depend. But regardless, here are my top 5 forwards in tier 1. Actually, I think the best forward this year is going to be Bailey Smith. I've got him in a range of 95 to 105. The reason I'm really comfortable to have him in that spot is Geelong, while they lack for some midfield depth, they've still got some good extractors of the ball. And while Bailey Smith, I still see him playing a centre bounce role and a wing role through this Geelong midfield, and that's all he'll be. He's a real high time on ground style player. I think that early round bye that they've got will actually help the load management of him. He is a long time by the time the season starts, 14 months removed from when he first did that ACL, and he is the future of this midfield. They've got some good contested and clearance winners still in that side, regardless of age. I think he's still going to get plenty of transition scoring, and his work rate to get up and down around the ground is going to be rewarded. So to me, do not see him dropping more away than a 95. I think a 105 is his capacity, but we have seen historically he's got 110 scoring runs all on him. I know others aren't as bullish on his ceiling at 95. Some might project that he could go as 90 as his basement. I could see exactly how they land in that pocket and how they get in that spot. I'm just pretty confident on what he's going to be. To me, he's the best forward in the list. Is he a first-round pick? No, we're not talking about that on this episode. We do that on our mock draft review because it's a little hot tip. In a 12-team league, Bailey Smith went early. And was it a good decision or not? We'll be releasing that episode real soon on the channel for your draft and keeper platform fans. Jackson Macrae, I've got him in this tier as well, ranging between 90 and 105. We spoke at lengths with Jane Poposky on him in the 50 most relevant, looking at just how important and vital and critical he is as a scoring through transition style player. And he's gone into an incredible ecosystem that nurtures that exact style of scoring. And he's the number 2 mid now. No Philippou early will only even further enhance his chance to score at stoppage. So to me, a great pick, a great buy. Some even have him as their F1 in their tier 1. And again, I see exactly that. I've got his projected average range from 90 right up to a 105. So again, there's a world here where he does sit in that pocket. But he is the only other forward alongside Bailey Smith that I can forecast as going 100 plus this year. Could others? Of course they could. But this is why I've got them here. They're the only two I've got confidence projecting 100 average here. Could be in their destiny. Jackson Macrae, I've got him going from 90 to 105 as his range of outcomes this year. I think the third best forward this year is going to be a Jason Horne-Francis. About a week or two ago, I actually had Macrae and Horne-Francis changed. Not so much in terms of their range of scoring, but because I think Macrae's more likely to go 90 at his floor than Horne-Francis is to go 99, but I'm more confident 2 weeks ago that Horne-Francis would be in the 90s. I know that feels really convoluted and confusing, but I hope it does make a little bit of sense that Macrae, has got a broader range of scoring. Horne-Francis is why it's not a higher ceiling. Feel he's more probable of sitting in the pocket where I'd like him to be. I've got him going 90 to 99. It's still a tier 1 forward. 100 of us, of course, within his range of outcomes. But when I look at guys like Butters, Rosie, Drew, Boak, to a lesser extent, Wines, these are other options that roll through the midfield, and I still think they want to use his power forward of the ball. He's so dynamic, he's so challenging, and he's such a hard matchup. I think he'll spend more time through the midfield than he did forward last year and get the balance and split more favourable to the mid, but I see him as an impact per possession type player, which if we were scoring with some level of customizations, which you can do on keeper, and commissioners can enact that and enable that. But if we're just going pure straight keeper scoring without any customizations added, I still think he's a 90 to 99 range. I just don't think he's got the ceiling capacity of a Smith and Macrae, and it's more because he's not a transition scorer. He's not a high volume accumulator. Both of these guys have shown that capacity. Last two players I've got as tier 1 forwards. Dylan Moore. I've actually got him matching a similar projected range of outcomes and a similar average to what I do have for Jason Horne-Francis. So I think he can go from a 90 to a 99. And the good thing about what I like here is Horne-Francis is a shoo-in based on ADP and the drafts I've watched and participated in. He's not really... People are picking him in the first round, late on the turn in a snake. And if not, he's barely, if ever, getting out of the second round. And yet Dylan Moore's never in those top 20 to 25 selections. So again, this is where the tier comes into benefit, is while people will value the name that sits alongside a Horne-Francis, I actually think the scoring capacity of Moore is identical to a Jason Horne-Francis. So I'd almost rather prefer to get Moore 2 rounds later or a round and a half later than what I could be with there. All of a sudden, a Sinclair could still be sitting to me, and I'm getting, depending on where I sit, I could get a Cherry, a Sinclair, and yeah, I'll get a Dylan Moore later while everyone's picking tier 2 mids or tier 2 defenders. I'm now adding another tier 1 top line option. So to me, I think Dylan Moore is going to present great value for coaches. He's shown multiple years he's a mid to high 90s guys and go on runs of 100 plus well and truly. And the last tier 1 forward I have, Caleb Daniel. Really quite bullish on him. But of all my tier 1 forwards, I think he's got the lowest ceiling about him. I've got his range of average sitting between 85 and 95. It's the lowest basement of all of them because I can see games and world where it just doesn't land Caleb's way. The kick-ins don't come his way. Whomever is sitting on the other halfback flank and also sharing some distribution opportunities might take away some of those ceiling games a little bit. And Daniel's never really put up a high volume of monster 120s, 130s, 140s. Now, he might do this in the North Melbourne Echoes chamber and inside their system, but you've got to base it off a little bit of what you've seen and feel. I just don't see 100 as his outcome, and I can see some of those ceiling games not really popping for him. That said, again, he's going to return great value on draft day when you contrast. There's a world here where Daniel and Bailey Smith, based on my projected average range, could be near identical, and you're paying drastic different pockets. But to me, they're the 5 best forwards I've got this year. Smith, McRae, Horne-Francis, Moore, and Daniel. Those are the players that sit inside tier 1 across every single line. Are they similar to yours? Are they different? I'd love to know. You can, if you're watching this video, comment below and let me know. If you want access to all of my tiers across all of the lines that are available for our breakout and our premium tier Patreons, make sure you go and grab that. Support the channel as you do so, and also gain access to how we would go and I would go about approaching draft day. Hey, thank you so much for tuning in. We appreciate your support. We wish you well as you get closer to your draft day on the Keeper platform, and there'll be more Keeper content coming to you on this channel, as well as the DPP editions as they land season round. So it's not just the preseason draft content we've got covered or the salary cap stuff across the other platforms. We'll also keep you up to date right throughout the year with what's happening with Keeper, both in the changes and the positional allocations that land season long. Thank you so much for tuning in. We'll be back with you real soon, talking all things fantasy footy.